Global pressures, or temperatures rather, are on course to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2050, 10 years earlier than the initial projections. It comes as stronger storms, heat waves, floods and rising sea levels have for the first time been blamed on human action. Experts say the only way to curb the rise in global temperature is to rather consign coal to history and shift to what is called cleaner energy in our attempts to try and boost how we actually consume energy in the world. But can world leaders actually be convinced to drastically limit greenhouse emissions? Let's get some perspective now from Makoma Lekalakala, who's director at Earthlife Africa. Makoma, thanks very much indeed for your time. Really appreciated on the AM report. Perhaps let's start with the broad stroke takes on this report. Various reports have been issued in the past. What's different about this one?
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me on the show. I don't think there's anything different. This report builds on the 30 years of warnings that we got from our climate science, and also it brings much closer what people have been experiencing at different places. Right now, there has been headlines of floods in Europe. We've had that here in the southern African region. We've experienced drought. So the science is actually saying, the report actually built on the reports that we have received for the past years, from assessment report number 1, this is number 6, and it's saying we need to do something. And for us to be able to change the situation, that would mean that the decisions we take today would actually predict what has got to happen in the future. And we cannot just hope that politicians or governments would be the ones to do that. Yes, they've got that power to be able to make things happen, but it also depends on us as individuals, either holding them accountable or either doing things differently from what we have been doing in the past.
I'm glad you touched on the issue of individual agency, essentially what you and I as individuals can do to try turn the tide. For a South African living in urban Johannesburg who's got many other problems, why should they care about what this report says?
If you live in urban Johannesburg, obviously you're breathing a dirty air. And this air doesn't only come from what would be said it's industrial activities in the area. The dirty air also comes from the high veld of Mpumalanga, where there's a concentration of coal-fired power stations. And it has been reported, and I think last year we've had this situation whereby we had the most stinky air in Johannesburg that we've never experienced before. And that is exactly part of what causes the problem. The problem in South Africa is for us on how we generate electricity. This report says we need to move faster. We had moved slower. We need to move faster towards greater investment in renewable energy. This report says we can no longer authorize any coal-fired power station or coal mines or the kind of energy generation that is also brought forward, like the car power ships. That this report says that as individuals, we can actually make sure that there is energy democracy, that these kinds of projects don't actually see the light of the day, because if they do, that would mean that we'll have the intensity to grief like we have now.
So there's what the report says, and there's what world leaders still do nonetheless. In fact, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, saying that this report should sound a death knell for things like coal-powered stations or for coal being used as a source of energy. Do you see that happening, though? Do you see a context where countries like China, which is the greatest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, will do away with a system that's clearly worked for them for so long because they're worried about the environment?
We're going to China. I think it's just kind of a bit far. We should start here at home. And here at home, we've got that problem that we always have been told that our economy has been strengthened by the way we generate electricity. So starting here at home, we'll be saying this report sounds a death knell to say we can no longer go that route. over 3,000 megawatts of coal-fired power station, which is not even in the energy plan, should not go ahead, the one that is being proposed at the Musina Makado Special Economic Zone. So if we start from home, that would mean that we can also be exemplary. South Africa has been seen as that country which is exemplary, which has brought in a democracy not in a form of democracy where people had not even had to go to war. So we can actually be exemplary. But with countries like China and other countries, they also have said that they agree with what the Paris Agreement says. But this report also critiques the Paris Agreement in a sense that countries have made an intention to contribute towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But what we see, if countries that are also in line with what is being advocated for in the Paris Agreement and are not taking that seriously, then it becomes a problem, not a problem only for that country, but a problem for all of us, because what happens is that country can actually impact negatively on globally what's happening.
Yeah, in fact, we're seeing more and more that it's the developing world that's paying the cost of the decisions made by the developed world. Earlier this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa made quite an important announcement, actually, when he essentially announced to the country that there's going to be increased capacity insofar as legislation is concerned for independent power producers. Help us place that kind of energy generation in the context of how we should respond to this report.
The independent power producers, bulk of it is on renewable energy technologies and investment thereof. And this we wholly support, though supporting independent power producers on renewable energy does not mean that this is a complete package, because that's still a centralized electricity generation system. What we actually are advocating for as an environmental justice organization, together with allies, we are advocating, we are saying that for us to be able to eradicate energy poverty, we would need to have a decentralized energy system, a system and a plan that would not deny ordinary people, cooperatives, to be able to generate their own electricity. With the current IPT, the way it is only meant for private companies to be able to generate electricity and therefore profit from it. But if it was a platform whereby even cooperatives, people's organizations, workers groups could generate electricity, this would be another way of eradicating or dealing with the problem that we have of unemployment. And what the president has announced this year of 100 megawatts or so, it is a good thing. But would ordinary people like me and you be able to generate that? And what are the bottlenecks around that? And when is that going to be gazetted so that we know that people can find ways and also request support to be able to also generate electricity?
Sure. Very quickly, Makoma, we are receiving this report in a context where we're counting down just a few weeks till COP26. That's just a multilateral grouping of several countries, if you like, that are set to put their heads together to try to fight climate change on a global scale. But despite those kind of multilateral arrangements, we got here nonetheless, where we're told that the Earth is warming and at an accelerated rate. With that in mind, do these multilateral interventions actually work, do you think?
We have been raising issues about the slow pace of which the Conference of the Parties, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is taking too long to come up with a climate change convention. And we hope that at the backdrop of this report, at COP26 in Glasgow this year, that the countries meeting would actually ensure that a climate change convention it's the outcome of the meeting, because that has been what all meetings annually have been taking place to come up with a climate change convention. And that climate change convention, we hope that it would be a convention that legally binds all countries to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to take steps, to have legislation, to have regulations, to have policies that would accelerate the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in their countries, so that collectively countries all over the world can be able to bring the temperatures much safer for everyone to live longer.
Incredibly important story, this. Makoma Lekalakala, thanks very much indeed for your time. Really do appreciate it. Makoma is the director of Earthlife Africa.